Bitcoin ripped through 120K, guys. We actually got all the way up to $123,000 per Bitcoin before pulling back a little bit here. In this video, we're going to talk about why Bitcoin has ripped higher, why we've gone up another leg here, and we're also going to get into where the price is heading next. So you're going to want to stick around. Before we do get into it, please make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the YouTube. Really appreciate your support. I'm also going to put a QR code down below for a Bitcoin tip. So if you want to support the channel, feel free to leave me a little tip. Now let's get into it. So why have we seen Bitcoin's price hitting new all-time highs? The reason is simple, guys. It's supply and demand. When I look at Bitcoin, I like to keep it simple. We know the Bitcoin supply, we know how much Bitcoin is being added to the circulating supply every day, and that's 450 Bitcoin. So really, we just have to measure the demand. And we have seen a ton of demand this year. And one of my favorite charts for measuring Bitcoin and seeing where the Bitcoin price is going is the Bitcoin balance on exchanges chart, which shows how much Bitcoin is being added to exchanges every day or how much Bitcoin is being taken off exchanges every day. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Here we go. So this green shaded area on this chart shows the Bitcoin balance on exchanges. And as you can see, since around November of last year, right when we had the election, we have seen Bitcoin moving off exchanges at a very fast rate. And as you can see in this chart, we have this orange line. That is the Bitcoin price. As the supply on exchanges is dwindling, we are seeing the Bitcoin price head higher. And clearly, this election impacted the way a lot of people think about Bitcoin and crypto, right? Since we got this pro-Bitcoin and pro-crypto administration, we have seen a lot more people getting enthusiastic about Bitcoin, and you can see that in this chart. Now, one thing I will mention is that over the past 24 hours, we have seen Bitcoin getting added back onto exchanges. 16,000 Bitcoin have been added in the past 24 hours. So maybe with Bitcoin hitting these new all-time highs, right, we got up to 123K. We see some people selling out of Bitcoin, cashing in those gains and looking to, buy something they want, like a nice car or a new house or whatever. So as the Bitcoin price goes higher, you're naturally going to have people that are going to sell some in order to buy some of those things that they want. So that's definitely something that we have to keep our eye on. Let's talk about some of the Bitcoin demand that we have seen this year. For one, we have seen the rise of these Bitcoin Treasury companies. We have seen a ton of companies decide to hop into Bitcoin and start stacking, following after MicroStrategy, who is really the king of corporate Bitcoin adoption. They now have over 600,000 Bitcoin, which is pretty remarkable. But recently, we've seen companies like GameStop decide to start stacking Bitcoin. We've seen the formation of 21 Capital, who is basically going to be like another MicroStrategy, using convertible debt to stack as much Bitcoin as possible. And it seems like every day we have a new company coming in and deciding to stack, which is awesome. I actually just made a video about Bitcoin Treasury companies, so if you're interested in learning about that, check it out on my channel. We've also seen a lot of inflows with these Bitcoin ETFs. Now, we got these spot Bitcoin ETFs at the beginning of 2024, and we've seen a lot of ups with these Bitcoin ETFs, a lot of inflows, and then we've gone through some periods where there are outflows, but recently we have been seeing a lot of inflows. So let's go ahead and take a look at a chart here of the Bitcoin ETF inflows. And as you can see, towards the end of this chart, we're looking pretty green. People have been buying up Bitcoin through these ETFs. And on July 10th and July 11th, we saw billion-dollar inflow days, which is awesome. So if we continue to see these ETFs bring in billions of dollars worth of money every day, that's going to lead to the Bitcoin price going a lot higher. We've also seen a lot of Bitcoin adoption at the government level this year. Here in the US, it's becoming very clear to people that this Trump administration is really embracing Bitcoin. We could see that with the Strategic National Bitcoin Reserve that was created in March of this year, where Trump basically announced that the US is not going to sell any more Bitcoin, and they're probably going to find some budget neutral ways to acquire more Bitcoin. We've also seen some of the individual states create their own state reserves. We can look at Texas and New Hampshire, and there may be a couple other ones as well, but those are the two that are coming to mind right now. And then outside the US, it looks like some other countries are creating strategic Bitcoin reserves. We could look at Pakistan, who announced that they are creating one at the Bitcoin conference. And then we could look at a country like Brazil, who introduced a bill recently in June to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So if all these countries and governments start creating Bitcoin reserves, that is really going to speed up Bitcoin adoption, right? These are the entities with all the money, and if they start buying in and eating up more of that supply, we are going a lot higher. We've also seen a lot of other positive legislation for Bitcoin here in the US and abroad. We can look at this Bitcoin Act bill, which is currently going through government. If this bill is passed, it's basically going to lead to the US acquiring a lot more Bitcoin. I believe there's a plan for the US to stack over 1 million Bitcoin in this bill. I don't know if that's really going to be possible at this point, but that would definitely be very bullish for Bitcoin. There is also an item in there that would basically make it so you didn't have to pay capital gains tax on smaller Bitcoin transactions. I believe the limit would be $300 worth of Bitcoin. So that would be huge if you didn't have to, pay that capital gains tax and keep track of it for those small little transactions. And that would help Bitcoin become more of a medium of exchange. We've also seen a repeal of SAB 121. SAB 121 was this accounting rule that made it very difficult for banks and financial institutions to custody Bitcoin or offer Bitcoin and crypto services. But now that this accounting rule has been repealed, it basically means that all of these banks are going to be offering Bitcoin custody services. They're going to be recommending Bitcoin to their customers, and that is going to be very bullish for Bitcoin. That means that Bitcoin is getting more integrated into the traditional financial system, although it's kind of like replacing the traditional financial system. But the more integrated it gets, the more assured people are that Bitcoin is here to stay. Outside the US, we've seen a lot of Bitcoin adoption recently. For example, we saw that Vietnam recently legalized Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We also saw in France that they introduced legislation to support Bitcoin mining in the country. And really all over the world, we're seeing countries start to come around to Bitcoin, especially as the United States is. And game theory is really playing out, right? The more countries that kind of hop into Bitcoin and create positive legislation or try to create a positive environment, we're going to see these other countries incentivized to hop in, right? And as the Bitcoin price goes up, we're going to see countries and governments start to FOMO into Bitcoin. Looking at the macro environment, I think that things are setting up really nice for Bitcoin. And the one thing that I'm really keeping my eye on is QE, when we're gonna get quantitative easing from the government and when we're really going to see the M2 money supply take off. Let's go ahead and take a look at a little chart of the M2 money supply here. And as you can see, around 2022, we start to see the M2 money supply come down as the government did quantitative tightening, and they did that quantitative tightening because of their COVID overspending and all the inflation that we saw. So we saw the M2 money supply come down, and right now we're starting to see the M2 money supply go back up, and we're starting to see the money supply grow, but it really hasn't taken off yet. And when you think about how good Bitcoin has done over the past couple of years, we haven't really even seen the money supply expanding that much. So it just makes me think that what's going to happen when the money supply really takes off? I think that Bitcoin's going to take off with it. I'm sure that we'll see other assets get priced higher, but it's really impressive to me that Bitcoin is around 120K right now. And we haven't really even seen the quantitative easing begin. We also recently got news that Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, may be stepping down. And people are maybe anticipating that if he steps down, we are going to see the federal funds rate drop. We've seen the federal funds rate get held pretty high, right? We were up above 5%, I believe. I believe that now the federal funds rate is somewhere around 4.5%. But people believe that if the federal funds rate drops, if Jerome Powell heads out and we get a new Fed chair, that's going to push the markets higher, and that's going to push Bitcoin higher. So I wonder if that recent news we got has anything to do with this rally. Maybe this is all speculation. I believe that Jerome Powell only has like 10 months left on his term before he would be replaced anyway. But if he does leave and we do get a new Fed chair, the likelihood of rate cuts is higher. One other thing I'll mention is that we have seen a lot of these Bitcoin short sellers getting wrecked recently. As Bitcoin breaks through these key levels like 115K and 120K, these Bitcoin short sellers are getting liquidated. As Bitcoin crossed 120K on Sunday, we saw $1.3 billion worth of Bitcoin shorts liquidated in a couple of seconds. And the more these Bitcoin short sellers get liquidated, the more we see people shift long on Bitcoin, right? Maybe these Bitcoin short sellers have been suppressing the Bitcoin price a bit. So as they get wrecked, we see less people short selling Bitcoin and more people going long. And I would hate to be shorting Bitcoin. That sounds like an exhausting and terrible job to have. I would much rather be long. My main takeaway with this recent rally above 120K is that this makes sense. We have seen a ton of demand this year, an overwhelming amount of demand, and we really haven't seen the price go up a ton. I would think that the Bitcoin price would be a lot higher by now. But with this continued demand, with more monetary expansion, with QE that is coming, I am expecting the Bitcoin price to continue moving higher. Now, as we have these big moves, right? We just went up to 123K. We're going to have pullbacks, and we're actually in a little pullback right now. I believe we're around 117K or 118K, and that's natural, right? We're going to move up a lot, we're going to come down a little, and then we're going to keep moving up. So who knows the timing of the next big move for Bitcoin? Who knows when we're going to hit a level like 150K, but I know that it's going to happen. So with Bitcoin, it's very difficult to predict the day-to-day, to predict the short term, but if you just hold for the long term, you're eventually going to go up. And the main reason for that is that the dollar is going to continue going down. The supply is going to continue to rise with dollars, and more people are just going to find reasons to hop into Bitcoin. So I'm feeling very bullish. I'm very excited to see where we head throughout the rest of July. If you didn't like and subscribe, please make sure to do that now. Again, really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching. I'll be back soon.